Hi, it's Tom. So in our last video, we were able to progress our project so that when we clicked on this picture box, we were adding controls, specifically card box controls, to this panel. Now, the problem that we had, as I'm continuing to add controls here, is you can see there doesn't appear to be more than the one. If I click on reset and click again, I get a different card. Again, what's happening is the card box controls are actually appearing in the panel, but they're appearing underneath the first one. So what we want to do is, before we actually add the card to the panel, or perhaps right after it, we want to modify the position of the card so that they're not overlapping like this. And specifically what we're going to do is we're going to modify the top and left property of the control, which will affect its position. All right, so in our project, I've given you a helper method called realign cards. It takes as a parameter a panel, and there's some comments that basically explain step by step what it is that we're going to be trying to do. So that you don't have to see me paste it line by line, I'm actually going to put all of the code in here and just explain it line by line as you fill in the code. All right, so the basic idea here is I want to figure out how many controls are in the panel, and then I want to look at the width of each control and the width of the panel and try to evenly space them. Of course, with the card controls, if there's like 52 cards in the panel, they're obviously going to overlap quite a bit. I want to basically make them center aligned, so if there is only a few cards, they'll sort of group near the center. So this is how I approached it. The first thing I did is I created an integer called myCount, and what I did was I counted the number of cards in the panel. Since the card boxes are the only control in the panel, I'm able to use controls.count. So then I base the next bit of code if there actually are some cards. If there's no cards, I don't really have very much to do, right? So if my count is greater than 0, then I go through these steps. The first thing I do is I try to figure out, no, I don't try to figure out, I figure out how wide each individual card control box is. So I just take the first control in the controls that are stored in the panel hand, and I check its width. So this is one way of doing it. Of course, I don't want to do that if there are no controls, and I'm making the assumption that all of the controls are in fact card boxes, and I'm also making the assumption that all card boxes are the same width, which you could argue might not be a valid assumption to make. Nonetheless, that's what I'm doing, so that's what card width is, the width of each individual card box. I also want to figure out where I should be starting to place my cards. So this is going to be the left-hand property, and it's going to be a number indicating, where in the panel the left-hand edge of the control should be. So I'm assuming I'm only going to have one control for now. We're going to look at a different formula for figuring out the start point if there's multiple card boxes. But at any rate, if there was one card, basically what I would do is I would take the width of the panel, I would subtract the width of the card, and then basically divide it by 2. Okay, so that's where the left-hand edge of the card would be if there was one card on that panel, and I want it to be kind of in the middle. So I have an integer variable called offset, and basically it's going to be where I'm putting the next card. So that offset is going to be, I'm starting off at 0 for now, but it's going to be larger or smaller based on how many cards I need to fit into this panel. So that's where we're off. If the count is more than 1, I know there's at least one, but if there's more than 1, then I don't want the offset to be 0, and I don't want the starting point to be the same, so I adjust it. Okay, so if there is more than one card, then what I'm doing is I'm basing the offset based on the width of the panel minus the width of a card, just like I did before. We'll come back to this comment I have in here about minus 2 times pop. Well, that's for the next task. And I'm going to divide it by how many cards I have minus 1. Okay, so that's how much I need to shift each card. If the offset is more than what the actual width of a card is, then I'm going to make the offset just the width of a card. So what this little adjustment does is that when I'm placing the cards down, if I only have like 2 or 3 cards, it's not putting big chunks of space between the cards. The cards are basically going to line up with each other roughly in the center of the panel, because I'm limiting the offset to 1 card width. Then what I'm doing is I'm going to determine, if I put all the cards together, what's their width. So all cards width is basically the number of cards there are minus 1 times the offset. So that gives me all of the spaces in between the cards, plus the original card width. So that's how many, the width of all of the cards entirely. And then I adjust my starting point. Basically, my starting point is the panel width minus all of the card widths divided by 2. So at this point in the logic, I now understand where I need to be placing the left-hand edge of my first card, and I know how much I need to offset every time I place a new card in the panel. So the next bit of code is about actually aligning the cards. So I'm going to take panel hand controls count minus 1. This is the last card in my panel. I'm going to be doing this from the last card, and I'm going to be putting it to the first card. The order matters. I'm doing it in reverse order because just the nature of when I'm adding them to the panel, I want the newer ones are always going to sort of go on top. Perhaps this will be a little bit clearer when I run it. Yeah, so basically the last card in the panel, I want its top property to be made equal to 0. So it's going to be right at the top of the panel. In fact, all of them are going to be right at the top of the panel for now. We're going to change that later on, but that's okay. Just for debugging purposes, I've added in this line, and you can do this if you want, although it's not necessary. I want to see what the top value is. So I'm writing that to my debug window. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that same control, that last control, and modify the left property. And the left property is going to be that starting point that I figured out before. So it'll either be kind of in the middle of the panel or a little bit to the left of the panel, whatever we figured out it needed to be. So that's that. The first card that I'm actually adding, but it's the last card in the last card that was added to the panel. So then I'm going to go through a loop for the remaining cards. And again, I'm going in reverse order. So I'm starting off my index at my count minus 2. So that would be the second last card that was added to the panel. As long as my counter is greater than or equal to 0, I want to continue in the loop. And again, each time I'm going down by 1. So as I said before, all of the cards, the top value is going to be 0 for now. But what's going to be different is the left property. Okay, so where the left-hand edge of that particular card is. So I'm going to make the left-hand edge, whatever the control was before it, that left-hand edge plus the offset. All right, so go ahead and code that. I'm going to go back up to my click event, and I'm going to make sure that I'm calling the realign method. So realign cards, and the panel that I want to realign is the home panel, which is called P&L card home. Let's try running that. All right, so this is promising. The card has appeared in the middle of the panel, so that seems to have worked, the middle and the top. All right, I add another card, and you can see that it added it to the left. And you keep on going. So you can see while there's room in the panel, it was just putting them right beside each other. But once I run out of room, you can see it's starting to overlap them now. So this is the offset is in fact less than a card width. All right, so I can keep doing that. And because of the order I'm putting them on and the nature of my card images, even though they're overlapping quite a bit, I can still pretty much see what the card is, although it's difficult. If I keep on going to all 52 cards here, I don't want to overdo it because it's going to reset. There, I'll just leave it at 51. Some of these are a little hard to read, like the 10s are a little bit hard to read. I can still tell what they are, but it's not easy. So what we want to do in maybe the next video is we're going to add some events to the card controls to maybe resize them dynamically so that we can actually see the card that we're hovering over a little bit better. So that'll be the agenda for the next video.